Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Emerald City Hockey's Seattle Kraken podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome to this week's edition of the Deep Dive podcast, Emerald City Hockey's Seattle Kraken podcast, presented by Queen Anne Beer Hall. Hey, you know RJ, Kraken going to be starting a 7-game road trip. Queen Anne Beer Hall, pretty nice place to go check out some of these away games. Still feel, get some of that CPA energy, be surrounded by Kraken fans, get that experience. Just throwing that out there for everybody.
Oh, for sure. If you miss the Kraken home experience with a bunch of fans cheering on the team, no better place to watch the games than Queen Anne Beer Hall. I mean, it's just like being in there in the arena, except actually you might have depending on where you sit, you might have a better closer up view of the game being on the TV there.
I was gonna say, and it might end up being a cheaper night out as well.
That is true. Doesn't cost $300 to get into Queen Anne Beer Hall, that's for sure.
All right, so huge news that we got to talk about here to kick off the podcast. Probably going to be the first decent amount of this podcast, RJ, and that is that the NHL, partnered with Discover, I should say, just announced that next year's Winter Classic, brought to us by Discover, will be at T-Mobile Park in Seattle.
You don't have to shout out the NHL sponsor.
I know. Featuring the Seattle Kraken hosting the Las Vegas Golden Knights. And yes, I threw in that loss there just to make them mad. This is big news. It had been rumored for a little while now, RJ. Rumors really started picking up steam last night, and then of course with today being this year's Winter Classic, we knew that the announcement was going to come about where next year's would be, and now we know we can start planning for 2024 already. We're only 2 games into 2023, 2 days, and already we got to start making plans for next year. I love the 21st century, RJ.
Yes, I know. Always good to think ahead there, and I like you throwing in the loss on Las Vegas there. Hopefully the Kraken can throw them another loss at the start of 2024 in this game. But yeah, it's going to be a fantastic event, for the Kraken and for this market, for everyone here. I was so excited to hear the news. Obviously, there were some kind of rumblings beforehand, and by the time the announcement was made, I think both you and I, Dylan, had a pretty good idea that this was going to happen. But we wanted to wait until it was official to fully kind of talk about everything, and I'm so excited that we get to talk about this now.
Yeah, and there is a lot to talk about. I guess the first thing is that all along as these rumors have been going, we've been talking about the idea of, look, this is because Seattle is a sports town. We all know that, and we all know how passionate everybody is about the Seattle Kraken. But this is, the league recognizing that. And we were pretty certain that the league was going to recognize it. Like, this is something that the league takes notice of. Not that long ago, Forbes had kind of published their annual, hockey financials thing, the business of hockey. And they, did all the current values for the teams, what their operating income is, what their revenue is. And the Seattle Kraken solidly in the top 10, no matter how you slice it, no matter what category you're sorting by, whether it's value, revenue, or operating income. Seattle Kraken are a top 10 team in the NHL only a season in. I mean, this is just talking about their inaugural season, and it wasn't even a good season. I can't even imagine when this team starts making playoff runs and stuff, the kind of revenue that they'll be generating. And so, it did feel like, hey, okay, the league is going to take notice of that. They are going to reward that. There's no way that they're not going to. I'm still a little surprised that it's with an outdoor game. We'll get into all of the potential stuff around that. But I'm really excited that the league is acting quickly on this, and they're not trying to say well, yeah, you guys are doing great, but we're going to wait and make you pay your dues, so to speak, before we throw anything your way.
Right. I think they see the reality. Seattle is a powerhouse hockey market already. And, when that's the case, why wait? And as far as, the event being a Winter Classic and maybe not something else like a draft or an all-star game, Kraken CEO Todd Lewicki did address that in his presser this morning. And, he said they explored a few different types of events, but he said the Winter Classic was high on our list. And that the league quietly came in, they did their side visits. The process has been going on for literally years. But it was a big deal for them to get a game. He said, this is different than a draft. This is a game where the fans can actually come and cheer and be a part of the event. Not just the event itself, but kind of before and after. Whereas maybe with a draft or an all-star game, that might not be the case as much.
Yeah, and it's it is kind of like the biggest thing, it feels like, that can be thrown a team's way and a city's way from the league. So it does feel like, yeah, it's not a stadium series game where they could be, in any given year they're doing like four of them or something, right? Like this is the Winter Classic. This is the thing that the league really prides themselves on, and they are awarding that to the Seattle Kraken a season and a half into their existence. Like that's pretty wild. Like I never did I think the league would do something like that with one of their big properties. And not only that, I just want to celebrate the fact also, being a West Coast hockey fan, that we're getting a Winter Classic out on the West Coast. Like that in and of itself is kind of blowing my mind, much less that it's going to Seattle so soon. So I think that's pretty awesome as well.
Yeah, I know. And growing up in California, this is something that we dreamed of,
Hmm.
having a Winter Classic on the West Coast. And yes, there's been kind of the Stadium Series games. I felt like there was, a little bit of a lack of, respect, recognition, whatever you want to
Yeah.
call it, from the league being like, okay, we can do an outdoor game on the West Coast, but we got to call it something different. It can't be the Winter Classic. But they've brought it out here as the league's marquee outdoor event in Seattle. And I think it's just the perfect place to do it.
Yeah, and it's not just some random game at Lake Tahoe or whatever with like no fans there, right? Like
I
whatever,
know, right?
whatever those were. So yeah, that all that stuff is really, it's big, it's huge. I mean, there's nothing that anybody should be experiencing outside of excitement when it comes to this announcement. But it does lead to a lot of questions, and these are all things that I've been thinking about, and I want to get your take on, and I do think that they deserve to be talked about. That just because we've been hearing the rumors, been trying to think about things, get the wheels turning, all that good stuff. And I'm going to preface this by saying this is only because these rumors have existed, so I've had time to really think about these. Feel free to ignore anything I say right now that maybe doesn't sound all that exciting or anything, because the news is legitimately exciting and everybody should be very excited for it. But I do think that there are some stuff that we should talk about in here, and some of this stuff will be exciting too. Like, don't just turn this off thinking it's all going to be bad stuff. But the first thing that I want to talk about, and it's really the first thing that the league and everybody has been talking about, and that is the weather factor. Because you and I have talked about this when the rumors have popped up before. The idea of, look, snow is fine. Right? They've been able to play these outdoor games in snow. You can just shovel the snow away. You can deal with snow. Rain, you cannot deal with. Rain is the
Nope.
one thing that can ruin an outdoor hockey game, because the water just pools on the ice. It will not freeze fast enough, and it's just going to create puddles that you can't really play in. It could be dangerous to skate through. All of these issues. So Seattle, known for rain. This was one of the reasons why we were maybe a little not quite so fast to jump on board with the idea of Seattle getting an outdoor game, just because we thought, like, well, that's a factor that the league is going to be very, very worried about. Now, obviously, playing at T-Mobile, it has a roof, so there is that aspect. But that does lead to the first question I have, RJ, which is, and they've kind of talked about this. Gary Bettman's talked about this. If you play it at a ballpark to have an outdoor game, but it's raining and you have to close the roof, is it still an outdoor game?
Right. And this was something where Gary Bettman basically said no about 3 years ago, when he was kind of floated with the idea of maybe having an outdoor game at T-Mobile Park, and he seemed kind of against it. And I will say credit to Jeff Baker with the Seattle Times. He asked Kraken CEO Todd Lywicki about that this morning, kind of reminding him of that moment and, well, what's changed since then? And Lywicki said that basically that Gary Bettman believed in the market. I'm trying to pull up the quote here. I think he's seen what's happened here and he's been totally inspired by it. And so basically, I think Gary Bettman has seen what a powerhouse market Seattle is and figured, look, we need to get an event here. We need to get an outdoor game here. And, maybe it's not the exact venue that we might ideally want if we knew the weather was going to be perfect, but we have to make something that's going to work. And that's still okay. Just to get an outdoor game in Seattle, I'll take it, basically.
Yeah, and I'll take it as well. Like, I just think it is going to be an interesting situation, and we won't know for a while what that's going to end up potentially looking like. But I'm telling you, everybody, like, seriously, Seattle Kraken fans, pat yourself on the back, because you are the reason that this is happening. I know I said earlier it's all about the revenue, it's all about the money, and that, you know it, the subtext of that quote is similar, right? Gary Bettman
Mhm.
saw how great this market is. Yeah, he saw the money that it's bringing in. But that doesn't happen in a vacuum. That only happens because everybody really cares about this team and wants to go out. They want to rep the merch. You want to go support them. You want to go to as many games as possible. And so none of this happens without all of you, the fans. So I do want to take another moment, just like remind yourself, like this is in part because of you. This isn't just some backroom dealings or whatever. This is because the fans are super legit. One of the things that was talked about in regards to the roof, just to kind of stick on this issue of weather just for a second, then I'll move on, was the idea that, look, you could have the roof closed while you're building the rink for in the days leading up to it. We all know there's not really any other, it's not going to be like baseball season leading up to this. And so that is kind of interesting that they can have the roof closed, they can build out the rink, build out everything that they need to do, not worry about the weather. They literally only have to worry about the weather the day of the event, and really just during the kind of window in which the event is going to take place, which I do think greatens the chance of this, actually being a true outdoor game, roof open, things are all okay.
Yeah, agreed, and that's part of the process that not a lot of people see. And Steve Meyer with the league was talking with Jeff Merrick and Elliot Friedman about this morning, and he said that it's while you're building the rink, you need to make sure that it does not rain on there. And so with the roof, they can close the roof the entire time they're building the rink, and then hopefully on the day of the event, they can just open the roof right up, and then you have a true outdoor game. Todd Lywicki said, "We hope it's on a day just like today where it's brisk out there, but we have the sun shining, we have the mountains visible, and let's hope for that kind of weather next year."
Yeah, and it's totally possible. We will for sure see. It is the other benefit of this is, T-Mobile Park, the roof can open or close in only 10 or 20 minutes. So
Mhm.
if weather starts changing, whether it's for the better or for the worse, they can make that decision on the fly. This isn't like something that they have to make the call that morning, like, all right, are we going all day without the roof, or are we just gonna have to play it safe and go with the roof? Like, they can make this call, potentially during the game even, which, I then have questions of, like, how cautious are they going to play this? How, you know what I mean? Like, are they going to close it maybe just if there's a chance of it? Would they potentially decide to open or close it during a period? That's another thing that I think is intriguing. I think if the weather starts getting bad, they would have to close it during a period, but maybe if things are going well and the weather is starting to turn for the better, would they go ahead and open up the roof while the period is going, not knowing really what that would do as far as shadows on the ice for the players moving, all that kind of stuff going on. Like, these are just the things that I've been thinking about for the last month or so while this has all been a rumor. I just think it's fun stuff to kind of poke around. The other thought with the venue that we've had, RJ, in the past has been, these outdoor games at baseball parks, sight lines can become a problem because if you're sitting, let's say, kind of field level, the field, it's far away. It's essentially sitting at the same level of like glass level at a hockey game, only you can't sit up to the glass. You're sitting potentially 45 feet away from the ice. So like, that's not necessarily a great one. If you're sitting in an outfield section, sometimes if they build it over the infield, you're a far ways away from the ice. However, I was thinking about it, T-Mobile, like, at least with the outfield, it's kind of elevated, and I feel like that helps a lot to offset that distance factor.
It should. And one of the parts of the context of us talking about this is that we have attended an outdoor
Yes.
NHL game at an MLB ballpark. It was at Dodger
Dodger Stadium.
Stadium, Kings Ducks. And the sight lines were terrible. I'm not going to
Yeah.
sugarcoat it at Dodger Stadium. But I think if you look at T-Mobile Park versus Dodger Stadium, it's a more elevated outfield. And I also wonder, where exactly, I guess they're going to put the rink kind of like from the first base to the third base lines, I would
Yeah.
guess.
That's generally what they
Probably there.
decide to go with.
Right. So I think the infield seating, like foul ball territory, is probably going to have some better views than the outfield. But I think the outfield's in a much better spot than Dodger Stadium.
Yeah, and again, I mean, elevation helps if you're going to be like low in some of those situations. I mean, this is one of those times where the most expensive ticket might not be the best ticket, Just gonna throw
Hmm.
that one out there. If you're gonna sit up high, let's say, on the third base side or first base side, sitting up high might be kind of the best place to be, and those tickets might not be priced to reflect that. So just throwing these are things that I would think about before purchasing a ticket to this. I don't know that what I just said to be true, but it is something to consider. So that's kind of everything that I had for the venue. I think otherwise it's a fantastic venue. I love that ballpark. I love going to see Mariners games there, growing up and everything. So I'm really excited for it. And I think it's a good, situated there in Seattle too, to kind of showcase a lot of what Seattle is. You do get those sight lines far beyond the city too. I think it's nice. The next thing I think everybody's going to be talking about, RJ, is going to be jerseys, because the
Yes.
rumor for a long, long time has been this is where we're going to see, a Metropolitans throwback kind of jersey. And well, first off, did we get an announcement or anything like that yet?
We did not. No, we did not get any kind of official announcement on jerseys. It's still in the rumor stage, but there have been some reliable people who have had basically confirmed that rumor as far as their own reporting, including Ali Murji, who leaked a lot of the reverse retro jerseys. So I think he's a pretty trustworthy source. Aesthetics has been on that as well. A pretty good source with league
Yeah.
jerseys, and someone who's also Seattle based. So I think that really does hint that I think we're going to see a Metropolitans type jersey design
Yeah.
for this Winter Classic. And remember also with the reverse retro jersey this year, the word around it was that we're not going to see a Metropolitans jersey design because they're saving it for something more special,
Right.
maybe like a Winter Classic. And so it all seems to be following that path.
Right. And this is where the idea of it being a winter classic instead of just a stadium series game also comes in. Because, as maybe if you're newer to Seattle based hockey, or newer to ECH and stuff, the Seattle Metropolitans team that existed over 100 years ago were the first ever U.S. based team to win the Stanley Cup back in 1917. And so to have a winter classic, because that tends to be where they focus on history and heritage and all that kind of stuff. I know they have the Heritage Classics up in Canada, but where they focus on all that stuff, to have it in the city that was the first U.S. city to win a Stanley Cup, it would make a lot of sense to then, really try to play out that narrative, focus on that idea, and have the jerseys represent the team that was able to accomplish that over 100 years ago.
Yes, absolutely it would. And there's just so much history here that you really can't find anywhere else on the West Coast. And maybe that was part of the league's
Mm-hmm.
decision to host this marquee event, in Seattle, as far rather than doing a stadium series game. And I think they're going to be able to do an excellent throwback to the Metropolitans. I know there were some questions, and I'd heard kind of the story behind the scenes about the difficulty in acquiring the rights to the Metropolitans branding and everything. That there was an owner of that trademark of that logo that was maybe a little bit hesitant to let the Kraken use it. But clearly, they must have figured something out here.
Yeah, and I mean, I almost don't even know like how long some of that stuff lasts, as we see. It's beginning of the new year, so Sherlock Holmes and Winnie the Pooh now public domain. At some point, you'd think a 100-year defunct hockey team might enter something similar like that as well. All right, so that one's really intriguing. Like, do you have just off the top of your head any ideas for what this could look like? Like, it's like I'm assuming they're not going to be wool. I assume they're gonna
No.
have nameplates on them and numbers and stuff like that. But I mean, do you think they're gonna go straight up with kind of the Christmas colored striping and everything?
That's what I would like to see. I want to see that barber pole striping. I want to see, the green, the red. And, I want to see that. I think you want to get as close to that design as you can while still
Mm-hmm.
having a modern and functional jersey. I'd love to see the S with the Metropolitan, along the
Yeah.
side. Just give me all of that. You don't need to change a thing. It's one of those that, over 100 years, it kind of comes back into style. I think it looks cool for something like this. I know that, what is it, like Ebbets Field or some kind of, there's a company that'll
Yeah.
make them, just make it look just like that.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's going to be the best way to do it. I am intrigued to see what Vegas decides to do for this. That's gonna be interesting.
Hmm.
And while I bring them up, let's just talk about the idea of Vegas is the opponent for this. Now, obviously, it should be pretty easy to discern why, and the league's kind of been open about this. It was just they're the two newest teams. Like, how cool would that be? Like, hey, a Winter Classic featuring the two new teams, kind of throw them together. And I understand that, RJ, but I am
Hmm.
wondering, like, do you think the Kraken at some point are going to feel too tied to Vegas just because they are the new kids on the block, so to speak? Like, because there isn't otherwise a lot of real history between the two cities, teams, organizations. Like, there isn't really anything there. But kind of regularly, we do find ourselves kind of lumped into the same category with them just because we're both new.
Yeah, and I think there's a certain level of that that's just inevitable that the Kraken are never going to really be able to get away from, just being the two newest franchises. And I don't think there are any newer franchises coming for a long time.
Yeah.
So I think that's just something that we're always going to see. And I know um, you look at this game, and part of the reason why the Kraken got it so early in their history is because they're a powerhouse market.
Mm-hmm.
And when the league has talked about Vegas, we also had um, uh, sorry, the guy with the league talking about the ice earlier. He was saying why, or in the roof.
Yeah.
I mean, sorry, he was he was saying as far as why Vegas, like we trust that their fans are going to travel. They've been a great market, and
Mm-hmm.
so I think they want to showcase the success of the recent expansion too. I think it's part of it as little bit the league patting themselves on the back
Yeah.
as far as these two success stories with these last couple teams. And so yeah, I just think you're always going to see that connection.
Look over here. Look at the right hand with these great, fantastic, good expansion teams. Don't pay attention to the left hand holding the Arizona Coyotes above water still. Um, I think there is something to that. I do think though that like is this a missed opportunity if you're going to lean into the Metropolitans, if you're going to lean into the first U.S. city to hoist a Stanley Cup, you think well maybe Montreal, given that's the team that they wanted over, and the Metropolitans kind of had a rivalry with 100 years ago. Like that could have been really cool to have a Canadians Metropolitans game. 100 years after they played each other for a Stanley Cup. Like I think that would be really fun. But I am interested to see what Vegas does for this. It also just feels a little like Vegas. They've already had outdoor games. Yeah, they were like those Lake Tahoe whatever games, but come on, still.
Yeah, and then or Vancouver would be another option with the
Yeah.
the Vancouver Millionaires history there. I mean, you know
Mm-hmm.
exactly what they could go with as far as a retro jersey, and it would feel like a 100 years old matchup.
Yeah.
And Todd Lywicki actually was asked about this. Basically, what I think the question was something like, "Well, why not the Canucks?"
Yeah.
Um, and he's like, "Well, we can't. We basically take any opponent at this point. We're just happy to host the game." He didn't. I don't think he really wanted to criticize the choice of opponent,
Right.
but it was something that people were thinking about.
Yeah. Just I'm just gonna mention it. Doesn't even need to like we need to talk about it or anything, but just like the music, RJ. Because every year at the Winter Classic, at any of these stadium events, they'll have concerts. They'll have like an intermission concert. They've got stuff done beforehand. Seattle, obviously, that stuff's gonna be fantastic. I gotta think they're gonna do a good job with it.
Oh yeah, it's got the potential to blow all these other events out of the water as far as what we've seen music wise. When we were at Dodger Stadium, there was
Yes.
Kiss concert promoting their new arena football team.
Yes.
I believe when I was at Levi's Stadium, it was John Fogerty. So
Yeah.
I think Seattle can probably do better.
Yeah, I was gonna say who played later because there was someone later at the game we were at too. Because Kiss played the opener, and then
Right.
during one of the intermissions there was somebody. Gosh, I don't remember, but it was just kind of like one of those like Coldplay, Nickelbacky kind of bands, but not as
Yeah.
popular. Oh, it was Five for Fighting, I think.
That's right. It was
That
five
was
for
it was
fighting.
Five for Fighting. Yeah.
Ah, it's hockey. Get it? Huh?
Yeah,
Huh?
get it, because they're like Kings fans or something. Maybe I don't know. So that one's gonna be interesting. I'm gonna put the odds at 3-1 that Macklemore has the opening show.
Oh, total. And I take that all day. He will be involved.
So I'm gonna throw that one out there, and then really for this next bit, I'm gonna ask you this question, RJ. But I also really want to ask this about everybody else. They can let us know. Come at us on Twitter at Emerald City HKY, Instagram, joining our Discord. If you're on YouTube, you can leave a comment below. But what do you want to see at or around this event for the Seattle Kraken. There's a lot of history. There's a lot of fun stuff that's you can pull from for the Seattle area that you can bring in. I'm really curious to hear what people want and maybe, just some fun predictions for something like this.
Oh, for sure. I know the community is going to have some great ideas. I mean, you can really let your imagination run wild with this. So please let us know on Twitter. Let us know, in the comments if you're on YouTube here. I think that'd be a fun way to open up the next episode of the
Yeah,
podcast.
yeah, we could definitely read off some fun ones for next week. I think that would be a lot of fun. I mean, we already got the guy talking about the ice situation and the weather, right? I think it was him who mentioned fish tossing. Like, just when he was asked
Yep.
about it, he mentioned the fish tossing. I feel like the Kraken already have a good thing for the fish toss. That being them
Hmm.
doing it after the wins. I don't know that Seattle needs to only be known for the throwing of fish.
It is one of those stereotypical things that if you're here for us, like, okay, yeah, we get it. Yeah, that happens over there where the tourists are.
Yeah,
But it is a nice touch. Like the Kraken made it work perfectly for their post game
yeah.
thing, toss to the fish. But Steve Meyer is his name, by the way. I know I forgot that earlier because I couldn't bring the right Twitter tab up, but Steve Meyer is his name. Want to get that right.
Yep, for sure. And then last, I'm gonna put at 11-1 odds that Bowie goes streaking all Gritty.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about Gritty going streaking. Yeah, I could see Bowie doing that. I could picture that, unfortunately. Um,
Got to show off
but
that tattoo.
oh, that's right. That's right. Yep. They'll have to have like a tattoo cam following for the broadcast, just knowing that's coming.
Yeah, so that's another thing to consider, everybody. What do you want to see Bowie doing at this game? What do you think he's going to be doing? What kind of antics? How do we want this? How do we want this to all get played out, kind of for the Kraken and their mascot Bowie? I think that's going to be an interesting one as well.
Oh, for sure. You know, one more thing I want to see,
Yeah, what?
and if this might require the roof being open, I want to see sunglasses Grew again.
Yeah, that would be awesome. That
Yeah,
would
when
be
he was with the
awesome.
Avs at that Tahoe game, he wore
Yep.
sunglasses under the goalie mask. I'd love to see that again. I think it'd look even cooler in a Kraken jersey
I think so too.
or Metropolitans jersey. I mean,
Yeah, there's lots of stuff. Give me fireworks at the end of the day or something. You know what I mean? Like, I know these are generally played to be like midday for the East Coast audience, so it might be a little early out here on
hmm
the West Coast, but like they got to be able to do something. Just saying. All
oh yeah,
right. So that was obviously by far and away the biggest news, RJ, for the Seattle Kraken is them hosting next year's Winter Classic. Super, super pumped for it. But it's not really the only news from the Seattle Kraken, as these last couple weeks they've played some games, RJ, and
sure have,
they've had some mixed results in these games, RJ.
sure have.
um, Now, their most recent outing was a win to kick off the new year the right way. We were undefeated, never trailed in 2023 so far. They were able to pick up that win over the Islanders. But really, through most of the last couple weeks, the talk has been around, I don't know, the defense, coaching staff, like just a lot of stuff here. And so I do think that we need to go ahead and kick things off, starting off by talking about it. Let's start with the defensive play, RJ. It was better for this Islanders game. It was a real point of emphasis after that 7-2 shellacking that they took at the hands of the Edmonton Oilers last Friday night. Do you think that the Kraken can kind of sustain that level of defense where it's just, let's stay by the crease, let's protect our goaltender, let's try to take away passes net front, and yes, it's more cautious, you're not going to lead to a lot of crazy breakout passes doing that, but it's what we need to be doing right now, just to kind of calm things down and maybe win some games.
I think they have it in them, and they've showed in the past that they do have it in them. And it was interesting because a couple days ago I asked Dave Haxtell about the defensive lapses, and it was following the Oilers game, and basically what goes into improving that. Is it something in the film room? Is it something that you can work on in practice? And he basically told me that it's just this switch that kind of has to flip on. Like, that points to more of a mental issue, where you have to be in that mindset and not just forget guys in front of the net. And I was hoping for maybe more of an X's and O's type of answer.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, we're cheating in a little bit too high on the PK, when the guy has the puck, things like that. but I should know better that an NHL coach is not going to, give away secrets like that. But with that Islanders game, it kind of looked like as a mental switch flipping on, especially at the start of the game, where in that Oilers game, you're down 4-0, 10 minutes into the game, and
Right.
on some really bad defensive lapses. And then by that point in the game, you've only allowed one shot on goal against the Islanders. And it just felt like a team that was more focused and that was really paying attention to, okay, where is everybody? You saw a lot more heads on swivels.
Mhm.
I think they have it in them, but that's the thing about focus. Like, how long can you walk a tightrope and maintain that focus when it just becomes your everyday?
Right.
No team can do it forever.
Right. No, no. And we've kind of seen this really from this team earlier as well. Back in November, I mean, they started off the season a little shaky on defense with a lot of these same problems, and then they really righted the ship. And next thing you know, they got a 5-game win streak. You got a 7-game win streak. The team looks absolutely unstoppable. And then that focus disappears, and next thing you know, you have a month like December where it's really hard to try to string 2 wins together. Instead, you're kind of stringing losses together, and things are tough, and it's you got an iffy road trip, and things aren't that great for you. So hopefully the team can keep it together. Hopefully the D can continue to play like they played last night against the Islanders, because otherwise the rest of the team is cooking for the most part. I mean, there's some top six forward issues that we can talk about a little bit later on. But sticking with this idea of focus, sticking with the more recent stuff in light of this Edmonton game that happened, where it really felt like a rock bottom moment for the way the Kraken were playing through most of the month of December. Obviously Dave Haxtell, he kind of challenged the team going into that Edmonton game. Things didn't go too well, and then as much as really any coach might, you kind of hear him kind of call the guys out, so to speak, in a way afterwards, and then the team responded. But I mean, we've had people ask us questions, RJ. I mean, just last night on the post game, there was a comment from Joey. There should be leaders on this team. Where after losing 8 out of 10 before tonight, where players make one another feel accountable and hold them accountable. It shouldn't take a coach to call the team out kind of publicly for that. And I'd brought up, also after that Edmonton game, the idea of you don't want the thing that motivates you as a professional team to be hitting rock bottom, because that can take a while. And you're just like losing a lot of games as you finally kind of get down to that point where you feel like you have to absolutely do something, rather than trying to say of like, hey, I don't like this losing thing after we lost 1 or 2 games, and then trying to turn the ship around. Kind of your thoughts on how much in your opinion, because you've played a lot of hockey at the beer league level, obviously not at the
Oh,
NHL
yes.
level, but just in your opinion, how much do you think of it should come from the players trying to motivate each other, hold each other accountable, and how much of it do you think is really on the coaching staff to be out there and motivating these guys to get up and play better?
Well, I'll start with saying embarrassment is a real good motivator, and Dave
Yes.
Haxtell did call the Edmonton game an embarrassing night.
Yeah.
So I think that was really finally the kick in the pants the team needed. Not even necessarily from the coaching or the players, just that level of embarrassment that everybody
Mm-hmm.
feels when you, as George Eberle said, get your teeth kicked in like that, or as Dave Haxtell said, got our nose rubbed in it pretty good. There are
Mm-hmm.
a number of ways that people describe that game, but I do think that yes, a lot of it has to come from the players. The coaches can't be the ones, just to finally say, okay, enough is enough. Sometimes you do need that, and good on Haxtell for trying to get ahead of it too. Because before
Yes.
the Edmonton game, he kind of challenged his team. He said, we need to decide whether we're gonna just go with the status quo that's not good enough, or whether we're going to elevate our game to another level. And so it seemed like he felt the team was slipping a little bit there and was trying to light a fire under them. It didn't work right away. Maybe it did need that embarrassment, and you'd like to see the team turn things around faster. I mean, I will say that I was looking at this yesterday, and that the Kraken have three-game losing streaks this season, but that's the longest that any of those streaks has gone. They've always been able to nip it in the bud at 3 games, and that's something they certainly weren't able to do last season. You'd see it go into 7, 8, 9. And I asked Dave Haxtell about that last night. What's different this year that's stopping these slumps from snowballing into longer losing streaks? Because at a certain point, they have gotten it together for
Mm-hmm.
at least 1 game to
Right.
stop the bleeding. And I thought his answer was kind of interesting because he kind of pointed to belief in themselves. Really, he said, I'll read the quote: "The realization in this room is that we belong in this fight. We belong where we are in the standings." And so I think that's something that maybe they didn't have last season. And when I tweeted that quote, I thought there was an interesting response here from Kevin Alschuler on Twitter, and he's a sports psychologist. So he works with these kind of things, and he said one of the biggest factors prolonging slumps is the combination of fear and eroding confidence. Often fear that maybe we just aren't good enough. Having a robust and genuine belief that you are good enough is a kryptonite to these sorts of fears. And I think even just having a better roster, this different roster
Mhm.
composition, having more talent, that belief that they can get out of this stuff, it has helped. But yeah, you'd like to see the turnaround come a little bit sooner than when you lost 8 of your last 10. But again, let's just hope this is kind of a springboard to better things on the road trip. I think the next week or two will be more telling, because I don't think the Islanders played that well in that game.
Mhm.
Against an opponent like, let's say, Edmonton again, who they're going to play
Right.
tomorrow. Are they going to be able to play better? I think we're going to learn a lot more from that game than we can really say right now.
Yes, I agree with that, and that's a fantastic response that we received there to that quote, because I do feel like that it helps us reframe what last season was for the Kraken, and it does kind of lead more into that, because a lot of the leadership structure within the team is the same from last season. Right, like yes, you've brought in somebody like an Andre Burakovsky who's won multiple Stanley Cups with different groups of people and can bring that level of experience to your team. But a lot of it is the same. It's still, all the guys wearing A's on their chest: Yanni, Eberle, Schwartz, Larson. Like these are all the same guys who were there last year. And it kind of, to me, shows that yes, last year they were really playing behind the eight ball. Like they were thrown together last minute. They couldn't get to know each other. You had COVID protocols very much still in place, and the entire season was them just trying to keep their heads above water as they adjusted to being on this new team, playing together, being in a new city, creating a hockey team within this market, all of that stuff. And it just made it to the point where they couldn't ever gel or really get with each other and get behind each other and start really paying attention and focusing on things like winning, because they're just focused on trying to get their personal life settled and trying to get used to playing for this team and just get used to all that stuff as you're still dealing with a lot of other factors. So I think it does help reframe last season in a lot of ways, and I think that's good perspective to have when looking back on that. But it is a strong leadership group within the team, and I do think that's why we're seeing them not go on prolonged losing streaks this year, is because you have multiple people within this locker room that we just know are going to speak up. Yanni Gord is going to speak up. A guy like Jaden Schwartz, he's going to speak up. He's going to be a leader. Larson, maybe he's not going to speak up so much, but he'll be a quiet leader. He's going to, go in there and he'll get the work done that needs to get done and kind of set that tone. But even the guys that aren't wearing, letters on their chest, Brandon Tanev, right? Like a guy who has always been known as a heart and soul kind of player who goes out there and tries to give every shift maximum effort. And just having guys like that, a Burakovsky in there, like I mentioned earlier, somebody like an Oliver Bjorkstrand, all of that stuff, just it does matter, and it helps create that culture of the losses almost don't even need to be talked about. Everybody's on that same page of yes, we need to be better. We need to do something different. Losing sucks, and we're going to kick it into a high gear to make sure that we're not going to find ourselves in this continued situation. And even somebody like a Matty Beniers, who is someone who very much seems like, a much older player when you hear him talk about
Oh
things
yeah.
like this. He does not sound like a 20-year-old who's playing his first full season. I think that helps a lot too when you have the quote unquote future of the franchise very much being somebody who's right there with everybody, who's, he may not be scoring points right now, but darn it, he's going to back check and make sure he's that, helping out that last line of defense every shift. And the rest of the team sees that, the rest of the guys see that, and it does help pull them out of situations that otherwise they might, not be able to do. And so I think a lot of it is on the players to kind of do that, and they are. And I am happy about that with this group of guys. I mentioned it earlier, and there's been talk about this with both the offense and the defense as they were going through that struggle. The idea of maybe the coaching staff needing to change some things around. We did see Tolvanen get into a game last game, and he gets a big power play goal for the Kraken, so that you see a shift there. You do see some mixing around of forward lines a little bit. First off, kind of what are your thoughts on how Tolvanen played? Because we haven't really talked about him outside of just last night's post game. And then also just the idea of where the Kraken seem to be going forward line wise.
I first of all, starting with Tolvanen, I
Yeah.
was thoroughly impressed in his first game as a Kraken. Obviously, scoring the goal on the
Yep.
power play, it stood up as the game winner. That's a huge moment in the game. But I think more than that, the 200-foot game, the back checking, doing all those little things right, the hard forechecking, I thought was impressive and willing to block shots too. If you look at after the game. Tolvanen got the Davy Jones hat,
Hmm.
and Dave Haxtell in his little speech before that, he mentioned, yeah, Tolvanen got the goal, but I like those two shot blocks a heck of a lot more. They're different words exactly there, but I like those two shot blocks a lot more. That's more important. And so Haxtell clearly liking, the entirety of Tolvanen's game, I think. And that was certainly my takeaway. I was really impressed.
Yeah, I was super impressed by him as well. Obviously, the one thing we knew about him was the shot. And seeing him take a couple slap shots, one timer attempts that are registering 90 plus on the radar gun, like that is special stuff. And not just that, the placement. Like that power play goal. He put it in the one place he knew because Sorokin, heck of a goaltender, having a fantastic season, was playing a fantastic game up to that point. He had to elevate it to that corner if that play was going to work, and he did. Not, it wasn't just that it was fast, it was also accurate. So really impressed with that, and having that addition to the Kraken lineup, I think, is going to be something that they can take advantage of moving forward. But yes, I mean, I talked about it a little bit last night. You expect when somebody's new to a team, new to a lineup, that they're going to go out there and they want to show the coaching staff that, like, hey, keep me in these games, keep me in the lineup, kind of thing. And so you expect to see them go out there and their first couple shifts just kind of hit everybody in sight and try to play physical and do all that stuff that the coaches just kind of eat up, right? But the one thing that he did was that back checking that you mentioned, that playing that 200-foot game. I mean, there was times where defenders were out of position and he was covering for them. He was down trying to block passes. He was really doing everything that he needed to be doing. He was playing lower than most Kraken wingers we've seen this season have played in the defensive zone. And so how much of that is a carryover from Nashville and what they were trying to work on with him there before he was waived? How much of that is him just trying to prove to this coaching staff what he can do? I don't know. As long as he's playing that way, though, I want him in the lineup because it is effective, and it is kind of exactly what the Kraken have needed right now. Little bummed to see Morgan Geekie taken out of the lineup for it, but hey, I mean, you can't argue with the results. Kraken pick up a win there. As for the rest of the forward lines and kind of what they're doing, big narrative, at least for me on these post games, has been that the top six has been quiet. It's been a long time since we're really seeing consistent production from anybody up there. Seeing some things shift around. I don't know. I think the biggest concern for me right now, looking at the top six, is feeling like Maddie doesn't seem to have a lot of chemistry with anybody that they've been sticking him with at the moment.
Yeah, I agree, and that line has kind of gone cold. Whether it's been with Jordan Eberle's kind of been the constant, but
Yeah.
Andre Burakovsky their last game, Jared McCann had been there for a little while beforehand, and we talked about this, a couple games ago, where as talented as those players are on that line, I think you pointed out that of those three guys, though, nobody's really going to the net. There's not a
Mm-hmm.
guy there who lives at the net. They're all perimeter players, and that maybe you want someone who might fit in a little bit better, just stylistically, on that line. Nothing against anyone there, but it's just not their game. And then moving Andre Burakovsky to that line last night, Burakovsky's a great player, but I don't think it fixes that problem. I
No.
think he's still more of a perimeter player. And so I think you've got to find somebody there who can go to the net. Maybe it's a Jaden Schwartz, maybe, heck, even maybe a Ryan Donato.
Yeah.
That's a thought that I had. We know he has the chemistry with Matty Beniers. But I just think you need somebody on that line who's willing to go to the net and kind of crash for rebounds and do those kind of things that the perimeter players can set up.
Right, exactly. Because that is part of it. Is normally you'd think, well, it's the center's role to be there, but Matty Beniers is one of those centers that kind of likes to be more of a free thinker, let's say, out there in the offensive zone. Wants to move around, try to find soft spots on defenses, kind of constantly be in motion, and it works for him. He's a really smart player. That's the one thing everybody can agree on when it comes to Matty Beniers, is just how smart a player he is. So you don't want to do anything that's going to take that away from him. I think both of those suggestions are good. The other name I'd throw out there is Brandon Tanev. Brandon Tanev is finding ways of creating chances with everybody who he's out there on the ice. And one of the things that I feel like has been an issue with Matty Beniers is Matty Beniers is good at creating maybe a turnover defensively, trying to get up ice, and a lot of times doesn't have a lot of support in those situations. Who does that remind you of? It's Brandon Tanev. So maybe if you can just kind of put together this like hyper aggressive forward line with a Matty Beniers and a Brandon Tanev, where Brandon Tanev is going to just kind of crash the net, but he's also going to be somebody who's going to be, he's got the wheels and he's got that kind of vision to see when a play can really get broken up ice like that. And maybe he could join a Matty Beniers, something like that. And it would be nice to reward Brandon Tanev, because he's been quietly playing really fantastic hockey. He's not necessarily converting all of these breakaway chances he's been getting, but the point is he's generating a lot of really good looks for himself.
Yeah, I mean that's been the issue, right? Is finishing. Although he finally able to break through, he's got a couple goals in his last 2 games, and so yeah, maybe reward him by putting him up on that top line. And it should be mentioned too, after the Edmonton game, Dave Haxtell clearly unhappy with his team's effort, as he should have been, but he did point out 2 particular players, and Brandon Tanev was one of them, Yanni Gourde being the other, that competed and worked really hard, and kind of showed them as an example of what everyone needs to do.
Yeah, and Yanni Gourde was another name that I thought of with Beniers, and hey, maybe if Shane Wright rejoins the Kraken after World Junior Championships up, and they need to stick Shane Wright out there as the third line C, Yanni Gourde's gonna be flexed over to wing. Maybe Yanni Gourde gets a shot with Matty B. Just saying.
Interesting. Yeah, maybe.
Why not? Like, nobody's scoring up there. You might as well try this stuff. Like, that's the bottom line. It's just like with the Kraken power play. Yes, they were finally able to get a power play goal last night. So now you're what? Two of your last 30 attempts. Awesome. Like, I still think there's a lot of room to experiment to get that average up, because that average is still not going to cut it, as you're going to be, coming down to the wire most likely to try to make the playoffs this year. So I'm still in favor of trying to be creative out there on the power play, trying to find stuff. I maybe go 5 forwards on the power play, have Matty Beniers play back and play the point. He's really solid defensively. We know that about him, and he's a really good distributor. He can think up high. We've seen him score lots of points, getting great assists from passing up high in the zone like that. I don't know. These are just things that I think, when that specific part of your game is struggling as much as it is, it's maybe worth a shot.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, on a second unit, maybe Beniers like on the point. I still like Justin Schultz as the point man on the first unit. But I mean, heck, you could. I talked about this on post game last night. You could just have Sprong on one half wall and Tolvanen on the other half wall, and just dare other teams to try and cover both of the one timer options. We know how dangerous that is. When the Caps did it, with Ovechkin, and they had who was the other guy on the other side?
Let's see.
Lightning. Sorry,
Lightning.
Yeah. Stamkos and Kucherov.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's Stamkos and Kucherov. That's what I was going for.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, I think all that stuff needs to be considered and stuff, because talking about the one timer stuff, Tolvanen obviously has the one timer. Matty, he just kind of doesn't have that one timer. It hasn't really been working this season. Maybe in the future. So that's kind of where it is. I just feel like the top 6 forwards have to get going. If you're gonna, who knows how long the defense is gonna have this switch flipped and gonna play consistent and gonna really be helping out the goaltenders. I think you have to take advantage of the time where the defense is playing like that to try to figure out how to get scoring again, because one of the things that they really struggled with was earlier in the season, the Kraken were able to outscore any defensive problems they had, but then this last, that last 10 game stretch or so, they weren't able to do that. They were relying on defensemen for goals, relying on the fourth line for goals, and that can do it for you for a game or two, but you cannot play a full 82 game season trying to rely on that for all of your offense. Another question I have for you, RJ, is, and I've been seeing a lot of talk about this on Twitter and stuff, And I don't know, I don't necessarily agree with a lot of it, but I do think that it deserves to be talked about just because of how much discourse I have been seeing about it. And that's the idea of Gru versus Jones and whether or not there's a difference in how the Kraken play in front of either goaltender. Because one of the themes of that last, 10 games where the Kraken were struggling was felt like Philip Grubauer was putting in some really, really solid performances for the Seattle Kraken, but the defense just wasn't there to help him out, and therefore, we were seeing a lot of losses pile up and some unhealthy save percentage numbers for Philip Grubauer as well. I mean, do you think that this team plays maybe harder for Martin Jones when he's in net than when Philip Grubauer's out there, or do you think that's just kind of anecdotal? It's just confirmation bias if you already had that opinion.
I do think it's anecdotal, and I've really tried going back through the games in my memory and thinking about it. Yes, Martin Jones starting, while Grubauer was injured, did coincide with the Kraken playing some of their best hockey of
Mm-hmm.
the season, but it wasn't all that good, solid defensive hockey that Dave Haxtell likes. Martin Jones was in net for that 9-8 win against the Kings, and yes, it was a win. But that's the kind of hockey, kind of defense in front of him that you would normally think that Grubauer would get if you go by that narrative. And there were other games like that 8-5 Sharks game.
Mm-hmm.
That can happen in front of Martin Jones too, and we saw it in the Edmonton game. Yes, Philip Grubauer was hung out to dry and allowed 3 goals in 4 minutes and was pulled. But then you look at right after that, Jesse Puljujarvi left wide open in front of the net and beats Martin Jones when Jones had no chance. The Kraken just were not playing well that night, and they continued to play poorly. So I think that is more of an anecdotal thing. And really, it's just these cycles of, okay, is the team focused or not? Are they playing good defense in front of their goalies? But I know this is something that we had to talk about because
Mm-hmm.
it's really picking up on social media again. I mean, you can see it from being in the building. In that
Yeah.
Edmonton game, when Grubauer was pulled after less than 4 minutes into the game, and Martin Jones comes onto the ice, there was a big noticeable cheer from the crowd.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something that, as much as we don't necessarily like to see it just because of what it means for Grubauer, it's something I think we have to acknowledge, that maybe portions of the fan base are kind of turning on Philip Grubauer. And yeah, we've kind of made our opinions known that we feel like it's the defense first and foremost. Dave Haxtell has said as much
Yeah.
on that third Grubauer goal. It's like, yeah, I'd like to get the save there, but that's about the fourth thing I'm looking for on that play, as far as things we did wrong. But yeah, I mean, what do you think, Dylan? Is there a difference?
I I don't think there's a difference, and I think a lot of this is holdover stuff from last season when Philip Grubauer did. It wasn't just the defense at times last season,
Yep.
and Philip Grubauer was leaky. We know that. I mean, that's not a secret, and it's not necessarily something that's can totally be argued against, as he had like historically low goals saved above average numbers. But I feel like this year that narrative is different, and it isn't that. Grubauer is not the Grubauer that we saw last season. And I also feel like, look, as I mentioned earlier when it came to some other stuff, last season was very, very different for this team and for everybody involved and all of those players having to go through it. There's a reason that the team seems so different this year. Just, yes, some of that's bringing in a couple new additions, but there's still a lot of carryover from last year's roster. That leads me to think that last year for guys like Philip Grubauer, it was just everything else going on around the situation that maybe led to that performance dip. This year, I really don't think that there's been a performance dip. I feel like both goaltenders, at least as of late, have been playing roughly the same. I feel like for a little while there, Philip Grubauer was clearly playing better than Martin Jones. I think Martin Jones was starting to get burned out after having to play just about a month straight, covering for when Philip Grubauer was hurt. I think at this point, it is a situation where you can ride the hot hand. Maybe you have Grubauer as more of a 1A to Martin Jones's 1B kind of situation, but I feel like both goaltenders had been playing pretty well. I think it is anecdotal. And I do think that, while last year there was some justified criticism of Philip Grubauer, I really just haven't seen it this year. And I'm a little worried that a lot of fans are going to, kind of really forever hold that first year against Philip Grubauer, and the fact that he doesn't have a sparkling save percentage this year, they can just point to that and say, see, he's just bad, when the situation around him in both situations has not been good, and I think could in some ways be a larger factor there. Like the defense this year, I feel like that's a much larger factor than anything he's done himself. And I think the wins and loss record is just, it's at some point random for a little bit. You
Right.
know what I mean?
Well, I think above all, what both goalies have done largely this year, most of the time,
Mm-hmm.
is give the team in front of them what they deserve.
Yeah.
And but that's great. I mean, that you kind of want that
Right.
in some ways, because when a goalie's stealing you games, you can get a little complacent, and you can maybe feel like you don't have to play as well as maybe you really do. And Martin Jones had a few of those games where he was stealing games for the Kraken, but overall, I think both goalies have just kind of given the team, what you reap what you sow as far as how you play in front of your goalie. And they just happened to have that stretch where they were playing good hockey, or they were getting away with some bad defensive hockey in November in a way that you maybe can't get away with in January and February. And Dave Haxtell's pointed that out while Jones was in net. But I understand fans looking at it and seeing, I mean, just the win total, and people will jokingly say, well, wins are the only important goalie stat, W's, but as Daryl Sutter would say, but still, I mean, you look at it, it is kind of brutal. Martin Jones with 15 of the team's 19 wins, Grubauer with 12 starts, only 3 wins. Until that changes, there's definitely going to be a segment of the fan base that might turn on Grubauer.
To which I will remind all Seattle-based fans, remember all those years with King Felix, and the one thing he wouldn't have in all the Cy Young races was wins, and how pissed off we all were about that. Just going to throw that one out there. Maybe wins aren't everything when it comes to determining a player's performance in a team sport. Imagine that. I will also say that Philip Grubauer, just right there with Martin Jones as far as quality starts, in proportion to how much they've each played. And Philip Grubauer also slightly better when it comes to goal save above expected. Granted, both goaltenders in the negative there. So I will throw that one out there. But I think Philip Grubauer, it's just a matter of time. The wins, if he keeps playing the way he's been playing, and the defense stays solid in front of him, the wins will be there for him to pick up, and things will start evening out. It's just like I said, I worry about long term, because Philip Grubauer is going to be this team a goaltender for the Seattle Kraken for a while, and presumably the starter for a while, for several more seasons. And I just don't want kind of the ghosts of that kind of write it off expansion season to stick with him through the length of his duration here. I think that would be very unfortunate, but we will find out, RJ, in the future. That's something far down the line, even further away, the next year's Winter Classic hosted in Seattle.
Yes, definitely.
just to try to go full circle here at the end of the podcast. I got one last question for you in relation to the Seattle Kraken, what they've been doing, what's been going on with them, and looking ahead. And that is, RJ, when is Adam Larsson's point streak going to end, or will it continue forever?
I think forever. I'm going to tell you
Seems
the answer
right.
You maybe want to hear. It's just not going to end, because Adam Larsson is amazing. Is that the correct answer?
That is the correct answer. And you know what? I've been saying it for a while that I want to see him on a power play too. I'm just saying, like, obviously he's a beast. He's racking up points like nobody else. And I still think that him and his love of shooting the puck could be useful on the Kraken power play from time to time. Care to guess? I'm trying to see right now. Yeah, he does lead Kraken defensemen in shots on goal, tied with Brandon Tanev, 60 shots on the season.
That's pretty impressive. And he had a goal last game, and I've got this bobblehead here for you.
I know, I'm so pumped for that. Thank you so much to everybody involved in making that happen.
Yeah. So, real quick, thanks again to Benny Drawbars, the Kraken organist, for donating that to Dylan. Did you see his outfit last night?
I did. Looking sharp.
with the tux and the bow tie and the top hat and the mustache. Oh yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah, no, that was good. And I'm just gonna say it. You ready? Just for everybody, because I got to while we were already talking about how great Adam Larsson is shot wise, outpacing Yanni Gourde, Daniel Sprong, Ryan Donato. Just saying.
Wow.
He likes to shoot the puck. He likes to shoot the puck. Shooting percentage wise, tied with Yanni Gourde. Just saying.
I think if we're just gonna do like Adam Larsson appreciation hour, I don't have a problem with it. We should probably make it its own separate podcast.
Probably. I guess you're right. Only 4 shots behind Jared McCann. Just saying, like a legit sniper there. I mean, He's right in there with all these guys.
I can't stop him, folks.
No, it's I'm just trying to milk it to an exact 1 hour podcast now. All right, we'll stop talking about that. Looking forward to the rest of the week. Next week, I think, is going to be a better week to talk about Shane Wright and his potential future and what's going on there. As we know, I will say what we do know, which is that Ron Francis is going to be having meetings with some people involved up there about what they might be doing with Shane Wright. Kingston has received, I believe, 6 or 7 trade packages from other OHL teams for Shane Wright, should the Kraken decide to send him back to the OHL. But we're not going to know anything until Canada either wins or is eliminated from the World Junior Championship. So next week, we might have a clearer picture about what's going on with Shane Wright. That being said, he's playing fantastic up there, and that's really all that matters.
Yeah, definitely. And they've got their quarterfinal game today, so we will keep our eyes on that and give you our takes on that one.
Yeah, it should be good. All right, everybody, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of The Deep Dive. Again, reminder, as the Kraken go on this road trip, looking ahead, and I guess we should just briefly, I think last night was a good palate cleanser so they could start fresh on this road trip. You agree?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it was very much needed. Just a reminder, this road trip, if you're looking for a fun place to go watch any of these road games, check out Queen Anne Beer Hall. Let them know we sent you. It helps us out. And I guess with that, everybody, go continue to celebrate getting the Winter Classic next year. Hopefully recover from any New Year's, shenanigans you were a part of. And we'll see you all next time. Hey everyone, before we go, we just wanted to give a quick shout out to all of our awesome patrons over at patreon.com/Emerald City Hockey, especially our Terror of the Deep patrons: Absurdly Sane, Alex, Austin, Brian, Coop, Daryl, Duthin, Eli, Gaby, Gary, Harry Legionary, Jay, Joey, Joni,
Joshua, Kitty B. Kraken, Leanne, Maya, Paige, Paul, Rebecca, Scott, Sean, Striatic, Tasty Kobold, Tank Commander Ty, Tyler, and Wendy. Thank you so much for making all this possible. We really appreciate your support.